I got Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, and I played it for Krasnow. Now, when Krasnow heard that title, Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, he thought it was the greatest thing he ever heard. This is the president of Elektra Records you're talking about. Krasnow, right? Yeah. The $10,000 suit, diamond cufflinks, the cigar, and it was a hoot. But in the end, we kind of knew, even though, I loved y'all and I loved that record. And I think I might even be the very last person on the thank you list that you and Dave thanked. Because during that record, I think Dave and I were carrying each other up and down Hollywood Boulevard. Don't have. Yeah. I think I put no secrets. In any event, so after I played that for Bob, and we thought about it, and I met with you and Dave. I just kind of thought it just wasn't the right place for you. Yeah. Dave didn't need to be underneath, for lack of a better explanation, under Metallica. You needed your own life, your own space, and that Metallica needed their own space. But like I said, the beautiful thing about it is here we are in 2025, and we're still friends and moving forward. We're all three of us here are moving forward in life, and that's wonderful.
The David Ellefson Show. Featuring Grammy Award winner David Ellefson and respected metal journalist Joshua Toomey. Presented by EllefsonEmporium.com. Here's David and Joshua.
All right, David Ellefson here on the David Ellefson Show. My co-host Joshua Toomey. Today we have a super awesome guest, Michael Alago. And we should probably just title this, Who the Is That Guy? Right. This movie, which he will talk openly about. He gave us a really great interview talking about his history in music, A&R, which is essentially the talent scout who goes out and finds talent for record labels. And, of course, he signed one of all of our favorite bands, Metallica, to Elektra Records. Yeah. Johnny Z took them over to Metallica or to Electra, and the rest is history. He courted Megadeth. He courted me and Dave to go over to Electra. Kind of knew it wasn't going to happen, and just because it's kind of hard to have two big metal bands on the same label. But he also signed Metal Church. Did a bunch of stuff with Cyndi Lauper and all kinds of
went on to sign White Zombie over at Geffen and did a lot of great stuff. Yeah, him talking about I'd never heard that you guys were courted to Electra at one point. How crazy would that have been had you guys been label mates?
He really started the bidding war because Tim Carr from Capitol Records had come to see us in, I guess it was probably February 1986. We did a little, I call it the P-Cells pre-production tour. We didn't call it that then, but now looking back on it, it's what it was. We went out, we basically played all the songs from Killing, all the songs from P-Cells, pre-YouTube, of course, so you could play new songs, and, it was not so widely bootlegged. Came back to Los Angeles and went in the studio and started recording the P-Cells album for Combat Records. But on that tour, Tim Carr from Capitol Records saw us play at Irving Plaza and loved what he saw. He had not yet tendered an offer, but after we recorded the P-Cells album, then that's when me and Dave, we actually stopped by my farm in Minnesota, where I grew up. He met my family. We hung out. That's where we saw a show. By this time, of course, Reaganomics was in full swing, the Russian grain embargo, so the whole farm aid, farming was just decimated, Fortunately, my family's farm survived it, but a lot of the neighbors didn't. And so we saw a show called Foreclosure of a Dream, and that's where we took the title. And I sort of stuck it in our back pocket for a few years until Dave asked me to write the lyrics for that, for the Countdown to Extinction record. So sometimes that's how songs are. You see a title, you get it.
Oh, yeah.
You just sort of catalog it, put it away, and then it's like, hey, remember that Foreclosure of a Dream? Let's write a song about that. So in fact, ironically, I was reading a sci-fi book from Robert Heinlein called Farmer in the Sky. I was reading that while we were on the Clash of the Titans tour. And that's when Dave said, we're writing for Countdown, because that was a very collaborative record. Every day we were writing songs as a group. He said, hey, in your book you're reading, why not write those lyrics for Foreclosure of a Dream. So he put me to task on that, and that's how that all happened. So, but anyway, I digress. So we were
right.
1986. Yeah, no, that's a problem here. Is there's just a story behind a story inside of a story. We go then from there out to New York City. We hire a new manager, and Michael Alago wants to court me and Dave. So he whisks us around town with the big fat Electra corporate credit card, and just had a time of our lives. And doing New York City on a real budget. You know, in any big city, when you're broke, sucks. You know, and we were broke. But you know, so Michael's there taking good care of us and wining and dining and, you know, hanging with the upper echelon of rock stardom and celebrities, and it was freaking cool. And then but that started it, you know. And then we went back to Los Angeles, and by then Capitol Records tendered an offer. MCA even stepped up to the plate. So we had about 3 labels, you know, with a line in the water. Capitol Records won out, you know, which I think was the right home for us. And so, you know, then the rest is history for both us and Metallica and Electra.
Yeah, it's you know, it's crazy. The first time I played New York was like the late 90s, and that was the first time I ever saw like a 24-hour McDonald's. And I was just like, you can get McDonald's anytime you want. That's crazy.
You know, I remember going there the first time with Jay Jones, our manager. I think it was, we must have gone there with Slayer and Megadeth. We played Lemoore in Brooklyn, and then we played the CD Gardens in Trenton. And I remember we were in Times Square, which was very dangerous back then. In fact, there's a movie about it here too. Then it was really, really dangerous. It's not Disneyland like it is now, right? And so it was all hookers and pimps and all that, drug dealers. And I remember we were in the Bojangles Chicken, and this guy starts hassling Jay, and Jay broke a bottle and was like ready to fucking go down and start fighting with this guy. I mean, it was going down in Bojangles Chicken. I'm like, holy shit. So, yeah, that was my first experience. Like you, 24-hour McDonald's, me.
Yeah, broken bottle, ready to fight.
Yeah, ready to fight at Bojangles Chicken. Welcome to New York City. Just like I thought it would be. So.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy how those towns, like, you know, growing up in Nashville, you know, in the 90s, Broadway was all, you know, peep shows and adult bookstores, and you just didn't go down there. And then now it's all, you know, Florida Georgia Line's got a bar, and Kid Rock's got a bar, and everyone has a bar, you know, and it's like a it's crazy how times changed.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
You know, and I remember that actually. I remember we did a family vacation down there, probably around 1980 or 81, and I remember we went to stopped in Nashville for a couple of days. Went to the Grand Ole Opry 2 nights. The second night, Dolly Parton headlined, and man, she was the queen. I mean, when she came out, the place erupted. You know, and I knew a little bit of that music from watching Hee Haw, and of course, when you grow up in a farming town like I did in Minnesota, country and Western are the 2 forms of music, you know.
Right.
So
you play both kinds.
Both kinds, yeah. So it was cool years later when I worked for Peavey. My artist relations guy that I hired to work for me, he took me there to the Opry, and we got to go on the stage and see how it all worked. And, you know, it's a stage like any other, you know, that I've been doing it myself. So, but to go on there and kind of see how that all worked. And in fact, I remember the bass player, he had a really cool amp. It was an amp peg, and it was a 2-channel, so he could have his electric in one channel with the EQ setting. He could hit it to the second channel, and it would readjust all the EQ for his upright bass, because you'd have to go back and forth between upright and electric.
Yeah,
because they were basically a house band, you know, so whatever artist was coming out. So that was good. I think that night I stayed and watched Vince Gill headlined, and you know, it's funny with country music, because, you know, they'll be singing their songs, you know, whiskey and drinking and loving and whatever, and then, you know, then they'll throw in a nice little song about Jesus, you know.
Right.
They're like, how does this work? Somehow this is acceptable, you know. In heavy metal, we can't talk about fighting and Satan, and we get all kinds of shit. I don't know. So anyway,
yeah, you know, I'm a big Johnny Cash fan, and it seems like, you know, he would always put out like the outlaw record and then a Christian record, and it's just like back and forth. Yeah, you know, I'm like pick a lane, bud.
I guess kind of like Elvis, right? You know, he'd be like Heartbreak Hotel and Jailhouse Rock, and then it'd be like, you know, some gospel records, you know. But didn't Elvis? Didn't he win his Grammy, or his biggest awards was from a gospel record?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
which I'm sure was heartfelt. And as you watch the Elvis movie, I don't know if you watched it or not. I thought it was fantastic.
I did. It was a really fun movie.
In fact, not only is it a great movie about a rock star, it's really a great movie about how fucked up some managers have been over the years. You know, Colonel Tom being one of them.
Mhm.
You know? And I mean, look, Elvis wouldn't have been Elvis without Colonel Tom. Yet, you know, they were joined at the freaking hip, the bank account, and everything else. And if you take one away, the other doesn't work. You know, and it's sometimes this codependent. I always said every manager needs to go to an Al-Anon meeting, you know, or a codependent meeting, right? Because dealing with the artists that they are, you know, or that many can be, you know.
It's funny that, you know, they always talk about fat Elvis, and you're like, I probably wasn't that fat. But in the Elvis movie, at the very end, they show you the final concert he did, and he was a big boy. Like that was wild.
Yeah, and you can see, I just thought that was a great movie, and it's interesting how deals are cut sometimes, and you know the ulterior motives that sometimes managers and agents can have. And look, this is a "what have you done for me lately" business, right? One hand washes the other, and oftentimes artists and musicians don't understand that because our job is to make the songs, play the songs, but behind the scenes, there's a lot of glad handing and backslapping that goes on. And then of course in that movie, it's, you know, Colonel Tom's got this huge gambling debt, and that's why he put Elvis in the casinos, which is kind of funny because, you know, he started the sort of Vegas residency. You know, now everybody has a residency. Sammy Hagar, you know, Nickelback. Everybody's got a residency, Cheap Trick, whatever, you know. But it's funny how that, you know, kind of started that. And it, you know, it's interesting. You watch that movie too, and you think, God, how big Elvis could have been internationally if he'd just gone with those other two guys, and they would have let him basically be what we've done, basically just go international touring artists, go to Japan, tour Europe, you know, all this kind of stuff. And you know, then you find out, you know, sort of after the fact, behind the scenes, what really happened. You're like, man, what a tragedy. You know, that scene where he basically just they get the debt from Colonel Tom. This is what we owe. It's like, there's no way we can pay this back. And he just goes up to his room and is like, Dad, call the doctor. You know what I mean? It's like, just make the pain go away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And how true of a story that is too, you know, and that it's one of these insidious businesses that sometimes a lot of people don't get out of. And, you know, in sports, it's probably gambling, you know, gambling is the equivalent of drugs and alcohol to rock stars, you know? So the sad reality sometimes.
Yeah, it's tough. And the you know, there's another documentary out there about the '68 comeback special, and it's, you know, it's showing Elvis super nervous because he hasn't performed on stage in like 7 years, and so he's super he's super nervous about everything. And then but then they say as soon as he like got the guitar in his hand and just started kind of jamming, like he just turned into Elvis, you know?
Yeah. Which you and I know in our own Elvis sort of ways, right? Once you get on stage, right, it just all comes back, right? It's just fundamentally there, you know? So it's like you get up there on stage and it all kind of happens, you know? So, you said you were asking me about Vic Rattlehead earlier.
Okay. Well, let's dive into our chat with Michael Alago, and then we will come back with some Vic Rattlehead talk. How about that?
Perfect. Sounds good.
Hey, just want to give a shout out to Non Heinous, who did our awesome skull artwork, which is kind of mascots that we have here for the David Ellefson show. So, Josh, thank you for bringing him over. You've got his Instagram handle, right? Because you can get some discounts if bands or people want to use him for stuff, for merch, right?
Yeah, head over to Non Heinous on Instagram, NonHeinous on Instagram. Let him know that the David Ellefson show sent you. He'll give you 15% off if you need art for your podcast, your merch, your album, all that great stuff. And you know, it's not you know, he'll work with you the entire way through. He sends you like actual hand-drawn sketches. You know, what do you like about this? Do you like that? You know, it's not AI. It's not a bunch of nonsense. Like, he actually is an artist, and he's doing some great stuff out there. He's done stuff for my podcast. He's done stuff now for the David Ellefson show, and just a cool dude, man. And you know, if you go check him out, just go follow him on Instagram, because you'll enjoy all of his art that he puts up daily over there too. So he's a good dude, and support the art.
Just like forming Vic Rattlehead, a
There you
sketch
go.
beginning to a final mascot. So cool. Thanks, non-heinous. We appreciate you, brother. So yeah, go check him out.
Well, thanks for joining the show. Obviously, I'm David Ellefson. My cohort, Joshua Toomey here, also has the Talk To Me podcast. Check that out. It's awesome guests, very informative. And today, one of my favorite people on the whole planet, who I met back in 1986. We've remained friends in our various journeys and paths. Michael Alago. Michael, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really my pleasure. And we haven't even begun yet.
Well, I'm sure everyone's going, who the fuck is that guy? Right?
I was
the name of your movie.
I was on the subway recently. Well, not so recently, but I'm walking down the stairs.
Right.
And there was a guy who works for the MTA, and he was actually on the tracks, not on the subway platform, but on the tracks. Okay. And he said to me, "Are you that guy?" And I said, "Yes, I am." He goes, "Wait a minute. We have to take a picture or else my wife would never forgive me." So he jumps up on the platform, and he has of course he has his iPhone with him. And, I put my arm around him. He goes, "Oh, I'm really filthy." And I said, "Oh, honey, listen, worst happened to me." After we took a picture, and I assume his wife was happy.
There you go. So just so our viewers and listeners know, Who the Fuck Is That Guy is the name of Michael's movie that he did. It's The Fabulous Journey of Michael Alago.
Correct.
Fabulous, a word you use often. So I met you, Michael, just to go so everybody knows. So Dave and I finished recording the Peace Sells, But Who's Buying album for Combat Records, 1986. We had, I believe, a demo or a rough mixtape of that. We flew to my farm in Minnesota. He met my mom and dad for the first time. And I remember my dad, would always, get in Dave's face. He'd be like, "When are you going to write better songs? When are you going to write, more mainstream songs? When are you going to stop swearing on stage? And you need to be nicer to your fans." And, all this stuff, which of course flies in the face of everything that our genre was, right? But, my dad and Dave got along well, and Dave respected my dad. And my dad was not the musical guy, but he understood business and, it's time to stop fucking around. It's time to get to the top. How do you get there? So we were flying. Our next stop was from the farm. We were going to New York City to meet our new manager, Keith Rawls, who our agent, Amy Summers, was introducing us to. And the other name on the list was we were meeting Michael Alago, who worked at doing A&R, in other words, a talent scout for Elektra Records.
Artist in repertoire.
Yeah. And I'll ask you to describe that in a minute. But the reason we're all wearing our shirts here today is because you, at least in our world, are most famous for signing Metallica to Elektra Records.
Sure.
The wonderful John and Marcia Zazula took a chance on them with Megaforce Records. You stepped in and signed them to the big leagues. And
August of 1984.
Yeah, so give us the history of that, because so they didn't kill them all. They were on Ride the Lightning. You had told me a little bit of the history, but just kind of give what was the sort of entry point of all of that, where you came into that.
Sure. I started doing A&R at Electra Records in sometime in 1983 when I left my gig at the Ritz. I was my brain just stopped. Anyway, so I left. I hope you do editing. So I left the Ritz, and I just started at Electra Records. At some point in time, I met John Zazula, and very quickly we became fast friends and colleagues. He told me he had a little label called Megaforce Records, and he's putting out a couple of records. And that's London, 1984. I listened to his records, and I said, absolutely. And he said to me, "Well, I do have a band that's going to be huge, and I really want you to sign them." I said, "Sure." He goes, "Do you think you could give me like $5,000 or something?" And I said, "Sure." I said, "Like, which one of your bands are you talking about?" And he said, "Raven." And so I gave him $5,000 to do 5 demos. And he came back to me with the 5 songs, and they were friggin' great. But the problem was one of the records John had given me was Kill 'Em All. I never heard anything like that before. I think, all of us who listened to metal back then, we were listening to things that were a bit more traditional. you know. But here was this band that encompassed old school metal, traditional metal, British metal, speed in this one thing. And I flipped out. I fell in love with them. And at one point before signing them, I went to see, I had some business to take care of in Los Angeles, and they were playing at the, what's the place on, something? No, small, not the Trocadero, the,
Not the country club. Country club.
was it the Troubadour? The Troubadour. Yeah. Yeah. And when it was over, I said to Lars, I do A&R for Electra, and here's my card. And he said, well, we are on a label. I said, I know, but you need to be on a bigger label. So, time goes by because they're doing their thing, and I'm just doing my thing at my office at Rockefeller Center. And I got a call from Lars, and he said, are you still interested in signing my band? And I said, sure. He goes, well, August of 84, we're coming as part of a triple act bill to Roseland to play with. That
was Wasp and Armored Saint, I think, right? Was it that?
Was Anthrax and
Raven.
Right. And
okay. See that tour. Okay, got it. Okay.
Right. That they were the middle act that evening. So time goes by after I speak to him. It's now August of 84. They're in the middle of making their Ride the Lightning record with Megaforce. Anyway, that night, it was an extraordinary night. It was sold out. And, they were the talk of the town then. And people were, everyone who came there, yes, they wanted to see Raven, and yes, they wanted to hear Anthrax, but they kind of everyone really wanted to see Metallica. All their tapes were getting sent around. There were flyers everywhere, and people were like, this is the band. Anyway, so they performed that night. They kind of killed it. And of course, I'm drunk. It's 1984. No judgment.
We were all drunk in 1984.
Thank you. We were all drunk in 1984.
I honestly was not drunk in 1984. I can
be quiet. We were all out of control, and
we were drunk. Yeah.
I bullied my way backstage, and I'm hugging everybody and kissing everybody, and at one point, I think James looked at Lars it didn't say it, but the what he was saying with his face was, you mean this is the guy that's putting our lives in his hands? And Lars said, basically said, yes, this is the guy from Electra. So the next day, they were in my office in the conference room. I ordered, Chinese food and beer. I gave them all this vinyl and cassettes that I thought they would enjoy from Electra, the Doors, the MC5, the Stooges, and stuff like that. And it almost felt as if they never left my office. Now, of course, John Zazula, John was furious with me because I said, I love what you did with Raven, but it's just, I heard this, and this is what I'm going with. What, Dave?
I said major label stuff, like Next Level. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, of course, for a minute, he was like, oh, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to sue Business Affairs. I'm going to sue Crack. And I'm like, you got to calm the F down here. And, in the end, money talks. So, they got a great deal. I think they got, for the first 2 records, they made money in perpetuity. We had to also put their logo next to the Electra logo, same size. And that's how that all just came about. And, I hate to just say the rest is history. It sounds a little corny, but
it is. Yeah.
The rest is history. They were on a trajectory that just was going further up and up.
It's really a phenomenon, wasn't it? I mean, even living in L. And of course, look, I know Dave, right? My first entry point in Metallica is I go upstairs because he lived above me, of course, on Sycamore, and one day he's playing, the No Life to Live. You know what I mean? I was like, fucking hell, man. Like that, you're right. I mean, I heard the same thing you heard, which is this is different. This is forward thinking. There's nothing like this on the planet anywhere, you know? And, now, it's funny. You talk about that office. Me and Dave were in that office, right? Because you brought us up to Electra. You threw a line in the water to sign Megadeth, which ironically, so they were making Ride the Lightning album 2 for Metallica. You got us on Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? We had already made the record with Randy Birds for Combat. The next step, Metallica set the stage, of course. Start with, the independent, move to the major. Anthrax did it, Slayer did it. We ended up doing it as well. And of course, there was maybe this question, okay, can Megadeth and Metallica be on the same label? As that was a concern. But you whisked us around town. I remember going to the whiskey. You took us to the Limelight. I'd never been to CBGB's before. I mean, you introduced me and Dave to like the nightlife on the credit card of a major label, which I talked about in the book. I said, man, this was the fucking life. Like, if this is a glimpse into the future, we're in, so it was fan. So thank you for that. But I remember sitting in that office building there, where you gave Metallica beer and Chinese food. And I mean, there is a feeling of these major labels that reeks of power, money. I mean, it's especially for a thrash band, jeans and t-shirts, driving around in a van, playing thrash metal or a motorhome. And it's funny because that night you took me and Dave over to Rutherford. Metallica was on tour with Ozzy. They happened to be in town that weekend, and you took us over there. We went and saw the show. It was Master of Puppets at this point. And you took us over there. We went backstage, hung with the guys. That was the last night I saw and talked to Cliff Burton, because it would be later on that tour.
Wonderful. Yep.
So that was a really a wonderful night, and just to kind of hear, the vibe of everything of where it was going. And, because you threw the line in the water for us, we didn't end up on Elektra Records, but we ended up on Capitol Records. It was the same thing. But I mean, you really led the charge. Tim Carr from Capitol happened to see us playing at Irving Plaza a couple months earlier. And so it was the same thing. You broke down the barrier, and it's like, oh wait, Alago's got a line on Megadeth. Well, we want him too, and then we had, I think, MCA. We had a couple people throw, and that's how that game goes. You kind of go, whoa, they're in. Oh, well, we'll write an offer too. So thank you for that. Because of that, we didn't do business together. We ended up on Capitol, and I've got some nice wall hangings behind me as a result.
Well, and although you didn't sign with Elektra, we've maintained a friendship this entire time. So that's the beautiful thing about it, Yeah.
And again, now we don't drink beer anymore. Those days are behind us, and so we've got kind of a synonymous lifestyle of that. So you went on. You signed Metal Church to Electra as well, right?
I signed Metal Church. I signed Flotsam. I A&R'd a Dawkins live album. Yes.
Yeah.
What you asked me, go ahead.
And then you went over to Geffen, right? And you signed White Zombie and the Misfits over there, I believe.
I signed Kane Roberts, who was playing at the time with Alice Cooper. I made a Misfits record called American Psycho, and I signed White Zombie. Yeah.
I love in your movie, who the fuck is that guy? Shania Stoltz.
Yeah.
She said it best. She said, because I talk to people about this, because the gift of A&R, and it really is a gift, and you have it. The same way I have a gift for music, Joshua has a gift for music. We all have the gift of gab. But to really see something, and she said it, I forgot exactly how she verbalized it, but she said, she goes, he saw something in us that wasn't what was happening right now. He saw what was going to happen, where we could be, and he took us there. A&R is kind of a lost, not that it's a lost art. It's just, we don't have the time and the money for it. And it's a TikTok generation. And it's like,
totally
making big like Christmas, and next year we're on to something else. Right. So talk about your era, because I have just such great admiration for it. To see something, nurture it, develop it. Like what is all that? Like,
well, back then I did not sign a lot of artists. I was very particular. I didn't care that if somebody was playing a demo for every A&R person and they said, well, these people are going to be big. Well, whoever it was, if I didn't feel it, I just didn't sign it. But I have a friend named Daniel Ray. He was in Masters of Reality for a while. He wrote Pet Sematary for the Ramones, and he is just a great guy. And back then, he was shopping Circus of Power, Raging Slab, and White Zombie. He got Raging Slab and Circus of Power signed to RCA Records, but nobody wanted White Zombie. They could have cared less. They had no songs. It was a bunch of noise. Well, he knew that was the band that I was going to fall in love with. So we're in the East Village on Lafayette Street, and there's a little hole in the wall down a bunch of stairs. Excuse me. And White Zombie are performing. Yes, it was a lot of noise, but I love noise. And for me, what it was I just stood there watching these four people on a stage that maybe was, 2 feet high, not even. And they radiated a certain charm and charisma. And I just thought, wow, I love these people. They were sweating. Rob's dreadlocks were flying all over the place. So they finished their set, and they wanted to know what I thought. I said, well, you don't have one song, but I love you, and I'm going to sign you. So we're going to work on all that. So for a long time, they used to come to my house, and we would... we would make pina coladas in a blender, and we would sit and talk about music and all types of music. And I got them to do a demo for me for Geffen, and the demo was very good. And it was recorded by an artist named Jim Thirlwell, who Jim was also known under the name Fetus. Like, you've got fetus on your breaths. Fetus uberalis, fetus under glass. Anyway, but there were egos going on. Jim's ego, Rob's ego. And I just thought, yeah, what am I going to do here? So I was grateful that Jim made those demos. But then we decided we were going to go with Andy Wallace.
Okay.
Because we liked the sound of the... I don't know if it was a bunch of Slayer records or one Slayer record, and we made that album. Is that what you were asking me about?
Yeah, so let me ask you about Andy Wallace here, because that's a name, he has his fan base, of course, right? Because he has made some incredible records, right? He just mixed the latest Ghost records, just
really
everybody who's current, just maybe new in music. You mentioned Slayer. Like, give a little bit of Andy's resume, because it seems like once he's in the room and he touches it, it's going to the top.
Yeah. Honestly, Dave, I don't remember what else he had produced back then. Yeah. We had a focus, and we knew that we liked the sound of those records, so we just said, let's just hire the guy. And he did make magic with that sound, because also the sound of that record didn't sound like other metal records at the time.
Around that time, he had done Seasons in the Abyss. He had done Sepultura, Arise, Nirvana, Nevermind. So you got a lot in there that.
He was really on the balls. We did this little run of dates. Look, Beavis and Butthead helped make White Zombie what we know it to be, right? I mean, at least off the launch pad was really run of dates. It was Megadeth, Pantera, White Zombie. I remember seeing them in the catering area in like either Kansas City or St. Louis, and they had get the dreads. They looked like a very grungy bunch, you know what I mean? Right. And it was amazing to see them. And of course, Rob, now of course we've been friends for years, but to see them start in that humble beginning like that, and in the early 90s, and then just go take off to where that went. I wanted to ask you something. So, you've been at these labels, right? You were at Electra. You went to Geffen, I believe, right?
Well, just to get in like 50 seconds, I went to Electra. I was at Geffen. I was at Electra. I was at Geffen. And by the end of it all, in 2000, Chris Blackwell, who owned Island Records, started a company called Palm Pictures. And
Okay.
Pop Pictures was half independent feature films and half record company. And that's why I wound up ending my career there from 2000 to 2004. I had worked in the business for 24 years and things were changing. And I just kind of felt like, I don't know, I had enough. But just to backtrack about the first White Zombie record, Las Exorcisto, Devil Music Volume 1, I was bragging to everybody at Geffen in those marketing meetings, oh, it's just a million seller. It's a million seller. At one of the marketing meetings, we saw that the album stalled at 180,000 units.
Oops.
And they were like, Alago, what are we going to do now? I didn't really have an answer, but thank God I didn't have to have an answer, because what happened was something that you cannot buy. Beavis and Butthead fell in love with White Zombie, and Mike Judge had called me and said, we're going to stop playing, the single, even though it's going to be at 5:00 in the morning. But they played that thing to death. I do know that really catapulted it to the first million seller.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. You can't buy that kind of marketing.
Yeah. No, free. Look, the Peace Sells Baseline on MTV, even though I was on tour for the whole time, it's like, it sort of cements your legacy. Oh yeah, you're the guy that played the piece, and it just, who could ever predict these things, right? So I had one of those. I mean, I had an MTV moment fall in my lap that I'm forever thankful for, So sometimes these things happen. So, over at Geffen, so I remember Geffen, suddenly Elton John is there, Whitesnake is there. So kind of these legacy bands, suddenly they're making polished records, great videos. They're all over MTV. And then, of course, Nirvana shows up, to basically tomorrow's music. So there's yesterday's music made very current. Then you had, then of course you brought the Misfits were there, right? White Zombie, Tesla was there, and of course Guns N' Roses, tomorrow's music, you know what I mean? So there was this kind of, but they were always the hip. It seemed hip. I remember their office there on Sunset Boulevard, it was like just
Electra and Geffen were kind of like, when I say the same labels, they were both very hip in their signings. They were no nonsense. They didn't just sign every single thing. Like I said to you earlier, that every A&R person said, we're going to sign this. If we didn't like it, we didn't sign it. But, when you talk about then tomorrow's music, that was Sonic Youth, Beck. Even at that point in time, Cher was having big records with Geffen. I don't know where we're going with this, except to say,
kind of more corporate culture, right? Of
variety of artists that were on the label.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking. Again, I lived in LA at that time, so just kind of what was falling off the trees, and like you said, at that time, being the capital. Look, Iron Maiden was there, of course, right?
Uh-huh.
So they were the 800-pound gorilla there. Us and Poison walked in the door at the same time. And Enigma, us off of Combat. Two very different bands, but tomorrow's music. But there wasn't a Nirvana, there wasn't a, Capitol kind of became this great catalog. There was Bob Seger, Tina Turner, Duran Duran, obviously.
Steve Miller.
The Beatles, there was a lot of that kind of stuff there. So, I was, when I looked around at other labels that, of course, then Interscope started with, Trent Reznor, and just, again, another everything's tomorrow's music, So I guess I'm just waxing philosophic on it, but you were there, you were in the corporate environments of that mindset. And I just think, what a great place to be, especially when you had success with a White Zombie, and something like that, which, for metal, turned the corner of like, that kind of began the 90s trajectory of metal music. At least from what I saw. So Josh, I'm doing all the talking.
Yeah, no, I was going to dive in on a record Michael brought up a few minutes ago, and that's the Misfits American Psycho record, which is an amazing front to back record. I think Misfits fans probably panned it a little bit, but I think that what they put out on that record is still catchy today. And And I just kind of go back to, kind of getting the Misfits back together with no Glenn, but obviously bringing in Michael Graves and all that era, man.
Yeah, I have always been a big Misfits fan since the 80s. I even had them play at the Ritz back in the day. I know that they were labelless. They weren't really doing anything. So I just thought, you know what? Let's make a Misfits record. F that. Let's just do it.
What year was that, by the way, Michael?
Like, what, 96 maybe?
So that was the tour they did with Megadeth, right? I think they were out on the road with us. I know for sure they were, obviously.
I'm listening. Go ahead.
Okay. So I remember Misfits were out with us. It was kind of this cool reset coming back.
Yeah.
They hadn't, of course, isn't it funny with Metallica? Sam Hain, James wore the shirt. Another popular, Cliff's got the there it is. Cliff's got the tattoo. Suddenly everybody knows who, Misfits are, right? So that, I think, was that the album that they were on the road? Because I think it was Cryptic Writings for us. It would have been 97, 98, something like that. They were out on the road.
Not 97, yes.
Yeah. So that would have been the run, which was very, very cool, to
and to bring it full circle, I actually opened for the Misfits on that record for one show. Man, the crowd absolutely hated my band because we were more of a new metal band. They were the Misfits.
You mean new as in NU?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, brother.
It was of the time.
Next. My friend Daniel, who turned me on to the Misfits, produced this, and we had Andy Wallace mix this album.
There you go.
I always the Misfits. I always just considered them like a pop band. These are like pop songs.
They kind of are. They were kind of like the Groovy Ghoulies, and it was like this interesting mix. Yeah, I thought they would be this really like menacing metal band, and they really weren't. They always had this humor about it. It was fun to get to know Jerry on that.
Definitely humor about it. Yeah, sure. And the lyrics were dark and, dare I say, fun. They talked about horror movies, but like the overall sound was always upbeat. So that's where I felt the pop element came into the whole thing. And, they're extraordinary live, and I'm so glad after how many years did it take for them to come back with Glenn and start performing at like 18,000 seaters? That was like the crazy part of it all.
Yeah.
And there was a show. There was, lights, cameras, action, it was almost theatrical. It was very like if you were on Fremont Street in Las Vegas, or you were downtown in Tokyo somewhere. Everything was just so lit up and crazy on stage for these, groups of shows. I think beginning in maybe 2019 is when they started doing these again. It was extraordinary.
Yeah.
I saw that. I went to the second show with the second Riot Fest they did in Chicago, and it was Deftones. It was actually Rob Zombie. Rob Zombie played the Astro Creep 2000 in its entirety, and then the Misfits played. And it was wild, man. The crowd, it was the massive outdoor festival. And the whole time I'm like, when they quit, they were, still playing clubs, and they come back 20 years later playing festivals and selling out arenas. That's one of the craziest trajectories out there.
People never forgot them. And then just for them to now know, oh my God, Glenn is now performing with them again. That's what was the beauty of the whole thing, Anyway,
I even got to see Danzig when he brought out Doyle, just because they did like a small chunk in the Danzig set.
Exactly. And Doyle is a star. He looks amazing. He's never mind. We're dear friends. Me, him, and his girlfriend Alyssa from Arch Enemy. We're all close friends. But when Glenn started bringing him out for these small chunks of the set, people lost their mind, because in everybody's mind, they were thinking, well, when are the Misfits coming back? Right. And I believe that all started again in 2019.
Yes. Who the fuck is that guy? So that was ambitious to take on a movie. I guess my question, and I haven't seen the movie and loved it, knowing a lot of your story anyway. For me, it was kind of a little trip down memory lane because it was kind of piecing together a lot of our conversations and seeing it in real time. So why the movie? You're a behind the scenes guy. Now you're an out in front of the camera guy. You're telling the story.
Right. Well, for 25 years, I was behind the scenes, and that was perfectly fine with me. I have no ego, really. But then this young film director, Drew Stone, decided he wanted to make a film about me. And we had long conversations about it. And then I just thought, fuck yeah, there should be a movie about me. And Drew made the film. And it really... it came out beautifully, and I was thrilled. Everyone who I asked to be in the film said yes, and whether that was Metallica, Metal Church, Cyndi Lauper, Phil Anselmo just threw himself in there. I had no business relationship with him, but we were really close friends. And I said, sure, come on in. So there are lots of people in the Johnny Rotten, John Lydon. I know him 43 years now, and we never had a bad word with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about him because, of course, for me growing up, he's Johnny Rotten of the Sex Pistols.
Sure.
Yes. He becomes John Lydon.
Yes.
And I've never met the man. I know Steve Jones, of course. Look at that. A picture on the left is just classic. And then you with Bono, right?
I booked that night. It was a Sunday night. Their first album was just coming out on Island Records. It was available in the States as an import. We had half a house filled. So I think I had to call Larry the Duck at WLIR-FM in Long Island, and I wound up papering the rest of the house. So that's
you mentioned a little while ago when you worked for Island became Palm Pictures, or that was their imprint or something. Right? Did you?
No, Chris Blackwell sold Island Records, and he started a new label.
I got it. Okay, use that money. I got it.
Yeah, that's correct.
I didn't know if you had any inner workings with you two at all.
No, not at all.
And Cyndi Lauper, every time we talk, I say, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm working with Cyndi, or I just did something with Cyndi. So obviously she's a close friend. You've done a lot for her career. Fill us in a little bit about your path with her.
Sure. I've always been a fan of Cyndi's ever since the 1980s when she was in a band called Blue Angel. I booked them at the Ritz, blah, blah, blah. We stayed in touch. Sorry about that. Fast forward, at one point when she knew I wasn't actively working as an A&R executive anymore, she said, Michael, I know, with that voice, I know you know how to make metal records, but do you think we could make a dance record together? I said, Cyndi, we could do anything together. So she made a record called Bring It to the Brink. Bring It to the Brink. It did okay. But we really enjoyed working. After all these years of just seeing each other on the scene, she called me back in 2010, and she said, I have another idea. She was always chock full of ideas that were really cool. And she said, I want to make a blues album. And I thought, oh boy, okay, a blues album. So I would go to her. Here comes the Chinese food part again. She lives on the Upper West Side in Manhattan, and I would go to her home, and we would sit in the kitchen with Chinese food, our laptops, the turntable, and we would start listening to blues records of artists that we respected, and we were looking for songs that would come from a woman's point of view. And so we made a blues album. We found a producer in Memphis, Tennessee, and Scott Bomar, and we went down to meet him, and it worked out beautifully. And he made a great record. I mean, it was chock full of these incredible session musicians, blues guys, session musicians, everyone from Alan Toussaint to Charlie Musselwhite. We even called Ann Peebles, who back in the day had a hit single called I Can't Stand the Rain. and it was star-studded. It did okay. We got nominated for a Grammy for Best Contemporary Blues Album. It didn't win, but what it signified to us was that we did great work. So I haven't done anything new with her again. She really hasn't done a lot of records. She's on this farewell tour, which right this minute, she's somewhere on stage in Europe. She really is. She's a perfectionist. She's an extraordinary singer, and I completely adore her. And for me, I always loved working with a variety of types of artists. So in my last phase of A&R at Palm Pictures, here again, I'm involved with Johnny Z because he likes Chris Jericho's band Fozzy. They didn't really have like a label by 2000. So he called me and I signed them to Palm Pictures and I made their first record with them.
For Fozzy? You did the first Fozzy record? No shit. Wow. Wow. Good for you. Yeah.
I think we had Andy Sneap produce that record.
Yeah.
I love him.
He's fantastic, isn't he? Funny. I was just listening to the new Dream Theater record. It's fucking amazing. Mixed up. Wow. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. And so, I've been friends with Chris. Again, another person that, once I become friends with artists, it's again, a beautiful thing that we managed to stay close. So I guess I met Chris and made that record in 2000, 2001. I also signed a little band from Dallas, Texas called Speed Dealer. I totally adore them. And I had Jason Newsted produce them. And then I worked.
Is that the Ario Speed Dealer, but they had to drop the Ario?
Yeah, because they were going to get sued.
I remember Speed Dealer. I didn't know it was Ario.
They were Ario Speed Dealer. And then
that's why it was okay to use that Ario. Yeah. And then the last artist that I signed there was Local H, a duo from.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, no shit, that's your record.
And Jack Douglas produced that album.
Nice. Now, Jack Douglas, for those, that's back. That's Aerosmith. That's Trick. Yeah, that's all the old. So all the records I grew up in the 70s were Jack Douglas records, So, wow. I didn't know Local H was kind of this cool. I love that record. Super. Yeah. So look, for you, just like me and Josh, look, once a musician, always a musician. Once an A&R guy, always an A&R guy, right? To have vision, to have the guy that can connect the dots, put it together, and it's just great. I mean, Michael, you gave me. I mean, I'm just reliving it now. That 1986, the weekend or week, whatever, in New York City. Or going to see Brian Setzer had just found out from the Stray Cats. And he was playing up at the Beacon Theater. I remember you hooked me and Dave up with tickets for that. It's funny. I remember at the Limelight. So the Limelight was used to be a church, right? So I mean, it's like something about how sacrilegious can you get. There was a church turned into this really cool nightclub. Mm-hmm. And, it was a who's who. Yeah. I mean, I remember you'd walk up, you just show your card or show your face and bang, we're in. I remember Elliot Easton was upstairs. 11 years later, I would do a rock and roll fantasy camp tour with Elliot Easton. I told him about that. He goes, yeah, I remember that. That was, I forget. He said something like, yeah, that was where I spent my first marriage, was upstairs at the night at the whatever. But it was the place to be. It was the hangout. You know what I mean? So
totally. Yeah. It was extraordinary. And everybody wound up playing there, from Guns N' Roses to White Zombie, and then
who played there? Was it like Lords of the New Church, or Gene Load? It was somebody like that played there that.
You could be right, Gene Loves Justice.
Yeah, I think it was Lords of the New Church or something was playing there that night. It was so friggin' cool, man. I don't know. We'd have to look up the. I'm sure some web page has that
time frame.
Yeah. So what are you up to now, man? After the dust is settled, the career's been great, the movie's out. How's life now?
Sure. Well, a couple of things. I just turned 65 in October. I just got 17 years clean and sober in October. And these days, I have a book out called I Am Michael Alago, Breathing Music, Signing Metallica, Beating Death. And So that came out during COVID. So I had to do all the marketing and promotion myself, but that was okay. And what wound up happening with the film is we are like the little train that could, because after our 3 years at Netflix, we got a distributor called us again and said, would you like to be on Amazon Prime? And I was like, yes, we would. Would you like to be on Tubi? Yes. Would you like to be on, oh, there I am. Yeah. You want to be on Google Play and Xbox and YouTube. So yes, the answer was to all of that. So right now in 2025, we are on 5 different platforms for the film that we never even thought, we were going to be on. Because a lot of times documentaries, they have like a short life. So after our 3 years, which is long for Netflix, there was no time wasted. We got that phone call. We said yes to everything. It's still on there. I still get people calling me from all over the world. They love the film. It was a hoot once when somebody sent us a clip from Israel, and the clip was Cindy with all these, Hebrew chirons underneath. It was cute. That's that brought it up for that reason. But yeah, the film is just we're so grateful that it's had such a long life. And let it. I hope it just keeps on moving on. So these days, what do? I still go out to shows. I mostly go out to very, very heavy. Not that that's a surprise to either of you, but I'm the heavier the better. Like there's a couple of bands that I love right this minute. Necrofire, Black Anvil, Black Braid. Oh my God, there's a band called Achilles. They hardly ever play in the United States, even though they friggin' live in Arizona. I just came back from Montreal where it was 20 below because Voivod, one of my favorite bands, played with a 72-piece orchestra.
Oh shit!
Wow. Yeah, thrash band playing with an orchestra.
Yeah.
It was done once before when Metallica did that with Michael Kamen. Again, God rest his soul. But, I think everybody was a little surprised. They did 2 nights, sold out. It was impeccable. It was extraordinary. It was like, wow. And I just think the world of them. Killing Technology is one of my favorite thrash albums as well. So I'm still just going out. I love the Broadway theater, so I'm always at the theater. I'm doing a lot of just writing, making collages. My life is just as simple these days.
Yeah. Well, once a creator, always a creator. Let me ask you this, because you brought up the symphony with Metallica as well. What was the last Metallica record you worked that you had your hands on?
Oh God. I say nothing after Master of Puppets, because that's I left at that point in time and I came back when they were making the Black Album.
Oh, okay.
Well, I was there. I probably put my 2 cents in with business affairs and stuff, but no, they were so established by then that they didn't really need me for anything.
They have to sit at the boardroom like at Geffen and go, this one's going to be big. It'll sell 1 million copies. Trust me. This time they believed you.
Correct. So I don't know. That's what I do these days. I keep it simple. I go to my 12-step meeting every morning, 7 days a week at 9:00 in the morning. I don't argue with myself about going because it's 1 hour, and that 1 hour keeps my head straight. So that after prayer and meditation and 9:00 meeting, I can get on with the world, and that also, is a wonderful thing. Not to want to not to want to indulge in any of that anymore 17 years later. That's like, wow, that was a while ago. Yeah. And I don't need to do that anymore because I'm clear, I'm focused, I wake up in my own bed every day, and I'm here to help others who could use my help in the program.
You know what? That is a wonderful place to close. That is a Josh, unless you got something else to weigh in, I would say you have wrapped a beautiful life.
Oh, good. Thank you.
It is a fabulous journey of Michael Alago.
Yes.
Thank you for saying.
We'll do part 2.
There's always a part 2. Yeah. So now this was great, man. Like I said, we've known each other for our 1986. You know, Josh said, he goes, "Oh man,
Are you sure that it's not a wee bit earlier?"
Well, I'm sure it was 86. I mean, I don't know, maybe we met before that, but I think 86, that was when, because remember we came into town with the Peace Cells records.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Are you sure about that? Or because I'm going to tell you something. What was the first record on Combat?
Killing Is My Business.
That's all you have to say. So I got Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, and I played it for Krasnow. Now, Krasnow, and I think it was at the time that we did meet, and I didn't know if we had made a plan for you to come to the office yet. When Krasnow heard that title, he he's Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. He thought it was the greatest thing he ever heard.
This is the president of Electra Records you're talking about Krasnow, right? Yeah.
The $10,000 suit, diamond cufflinks, the cigar, and it was a hoot. But in the end, we kind of knew, even though, I loved y'all and I loved that record, and I think I might even be the very last person on the thank you list that you and Dave thanked. Because during that record, I think Dave and I were carrying each other up and down Hollywood Boulevard. Yeah. And no secrets in any event. So after I played that for Bob and we thought about it and I met with you and Dave, I just kind of thought it just wasn't the right place for you. Yeah. Dave didn't need to be underneath, for lack of a better explanation, under Metallica. You needed your own life, your own space, and that Metallica needed their own space. But like I said, the beautiful thing about it is here we are in 2025 and we're still friends and moving forward. We're all three of us here are moving forward in life, and that's wonderful.
It's wonderful. Josh, got anything to weigh in as the closing?
Let me
here or not?
Well, let me ask one thing with obviously with signing Metallica, Master of Puppets, all that stuff. And Master of Puppets still being relevant with Stranger Things and everything kind of just in the zeitgeist of where it's got to make you put a big smile on your face at the end of the day.
Well, I just love that most of the time when they were in the studio, they didn't want anybody from the record company there anyway. But, I just knew that they knew what the F they were doing. Even back then when they were called Alcoholica. You know what? These people have certain focus about them, and they got the work done. But yes, it's wonderful that you brought up Stranger Things. I just love that entire series. And funny enough, Stranger Things is going to be on Broadway in New York. And I just bought a ticket for it in April. And I think everybody who didn't know that song was going to be on Stranger Things, everyone was just so surprised and glad. And Metallica rules, Metallica lives, and let's just keep moving forward here, all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this is great. This is a great power trio today. So, Michael, thank you. Love you, brother. Thanks for being here. Congratulations on turning 65, turning 17.
Yes,
and all that.
Yeah, because we could listen to the Alice Cooper record and play "I'm 18." That was my first concert ever. I was 13, and it was the last night of the $1 Billion Babies tour at Madison Square Garden. And my cousin's boyfriend took me to it, and it was their last show of the entire tour, June 3rd, 1973.
And then after that, that's when they got rid of the band, re-imaged everything, and then his next record was Welcome to My Nightmare. Correct.
Yeah, with Ezrin. Yeah, and Steve Wagner and all those session guys. Yeah. Okay, we'll wrap this up, and I'll say thank you very much, and I hope all out there enjoyed what I had to say and what we all had to say with each other, and I'll be back.
Cool. Thank you, Michael. Rock on, brother. Yeah.
What are your what are your memories of Vic Rattlehead kind of coming together? I mean, obviously he kind of represents, speak no evil, hear no evil, whatever, see no evil. What was the coming together of Vic Rattlehead?
Good question. So June, July, summer of '83, we start the band. You know, Dave's writing songs. You know, they all had different working titles. Like Eye for an Eye became Devil's Island. Self-Destruct became The Skull Beneath the Skin. You know, so, you know, songs start in their embryonic form, working titles, whatever, you know. And then I remember, you know, the song when I had met Dave, he had a bass player named Matt Kisselstein that he was kind of teaching how to play bass, teaching him the songs. He was a nice kid from Beverly Hills. And I saw him years later because he was like the head of sales for the Eagle radio station in Dallas. And we had a good laugh, right? Here comes in Megadeth, you know, we're at top of the charts, and he's wearing a suit looking all dapper, and, you know, and we both laughed. Like, we both ended up where we were supposed to be, right? He should be wearing the suit, and I should be in Megadeth, you know. I remember, you know, so the song was called Speak No Evil, and it became Looking Down the Cross. And that's really where a lot of that mindset came from, of, you know, speak no evil, da, 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 right at the end, that kind of chorus, that vamp out. That's where that came from. So the speak no evil, see no evil, hear no evil, right? So that developed into really The Skull Beneath the Skin became the descriptive song about how that happened. And the lyric describes the creation, you know, pulling back the skin and, you know, everything from the skull and, you know, the skull beneath the skin. So, so really between those two songs, define what became the mascot Vic Rattlehead. And I think, you know, as you're starting a band, we didn't start going, we're going to have a mascot and it'll be like Eddie from Iron Maiden and, you know, da-da-da. Like, we weren't thinking like that at all. It was really more of the songs described it. Then we created the character. And we had this guy named Peyton Tuthill, and he had also gone to MI, Musicians Institute, bass player, very good artist. He's the one who agreed to draft up the first T-shirts, and they were hand-painted, oil-painted T-shirts. He's the one that did the No Posers T-shirts that you see me and Dave, those pictures.
Right.
Right. And I wore one of them on stage, I think at Palo Alto, when we debuted the band in February '84 at one of our 3 shows there in the Bay Area. But then he did the Megadeth shirt, which I think Dave is wearing on the cover of the Megadeth anthology album, which is also from that Palo Alto show. And he's playing Kerry King's Red Mockingbird because he only had his one guitar, the rich bitch, and he broke a string. So he had to quickly borrow. Kerry had 2 guitars. He had a more Black Warlock and the Red Mockingbird. And so he borrows Kerry's Mockingbird in a pinch right there on stage, and he puts that on to finish the show. So at that picture on the front of the Megadeth Anthology Greatest Hits album is Dave with that shirt that Peyton Tuthill painted. But that was Dave's description of the shirt as painted by, I think kind of loosely drafted it in by hand from Dave, and then Peyton, you know, painted it. That's what we submitted to Combat Records to be the cover of Killing Is My Business. And then what they sent back to us is what you see with this Gothic font rather than our logo. It's a monkey skull with like some jelly or something in there instead for the blood, right? And, you know, we were pissed because they didn't send it to us for approval. One day the album just shows up in the mail. Hey, here's your album. We're like, what the fuck is this? This isn't what we sent you. So Combat Records sends us this in the mail, and we call them like, the fuck is this? And of course they're offended. Like, what do you mean? We spent a lot of money on that. And you know, and it's like, but that's not what we sent you. And that's not our vision. That's not what this is supposed to be.
With the knife, it's like, what is this? Kill them all. Right. So it's funny. The title. So, summer of '83, me and my 2 friends, Brad Schmidt and Brent Geese, who had moved out to Hollywood with me and Greg Handovit. We're walking down Hollywood Boulevard, and there's all these Army surplus stores, and where we used to kind of shop for stuff in the early Megadeth days, right? So a ton of these T-shirts that say "Kill them all, let God sort them out," right? That was that. up in the corner of this one t-shirt shop, and I seem to remember it was on the corner of Hollywood Boulevard and Highland, on the southwest corner. There was a t-shirt up in the back corner behind the counter that said, "Killing is my business," and then down below, "and business is good." And we're like, that is badass. And so we went back and told Greg, and or maybe Greg was with us, I can't remember. We went back, we told Dave about it. Might have even bought the shirt too, to take it back to the apartment so we could look at it. And that's where the title came from that t-shirt.
So with the Vic Rattlehead character, he obviously kind of pops up on the first album, and then he kind of morphs into an actual person, and even down the line, an actual mascot that comes out on stage and everything else. How was the those talks of like keeping it going and kind of having the mascot, and on this album we're gonna have him do this, and on this one we're gonna have him do that.
Well, it's funny. The second album, so me and Dave and our agent Andy Summers are in New York City. We're literally sitting across from the UN in Manhattan there, at a place called Wiley's Ribs. And we're talking about the new album, the song title that we have, Peace Sells But Who's Buying. In fact, we may have even recorded the album at this point. And Combat Records wanted to call the album Wake Up Dead. And we're like, Peace Sells is the obvious the hit on the album, right? Plus it's a cool title, Peace Sells But Who's Buying. I mean, right? Keep in mind this is the mid 80s, right? So it's perfect, right, for what's going on in the world. So basically we're sitting there and we're discussing it, and talking about the UN gets all destroyed, and everything's shot out, and Vic Rattlehead's out front with a for sale sign. So that's where that all came, just over a plate of ribs at literally sitting right there. That was the exact view we had of the UN while we were sitting there. So Combat Records calls Ed Repka, because we'd sold enough records with Killing Is My Business, and now we had a bigger budget, and we had a bigger art direction budget as well. So they call Ed Repka. He creates that and creates our logo like that, really gets the thing dialed up, right? So that's what started. Every album then would have a different theme moving forward. Now, Vic Rattlehead didn't come out on stage as a character until, it was either 2010 or 11. We were playing a show in Cleveland, Ohio, and a fan came to the meet and greet all dressed up as Vic Rattlehead. Right? So this guy was pretty punchy, and he was fun, right? He was pretty rowdy and fun. We said, Dave invited him, said, "Hey, you want to come up on stage?" Maybe Sean or somebody said, "Hey, we should have him come on stage." So Dave invited him up, and said, on Peace Sells, why don't you come out on stage at this particular point, for the second half of the song. So that's how that happened. And he came out, and he was fucking on fire, man. I mean, he's out there running around like crazy maniacal, right? And like a loose cannon on stage. And so I think we got the suit from him. He let us use the suit, and because he couldn't travel with us. So then we started putting our crew guys. We'd always have a crew guy that would go out, like a production assistant, put on the suit from this fan. Yeah, that's it right there, right? And now I don't know who that was. That's the Dystopia tour. So by then, that's a crew guy out there doing it. But that became part of the shtick, and it just happened so randomly in Cleveland. So in fact, I remember one time we were down in South America, and we had it had the suit, and the mask had its own special case, and we're sitting there looking out. We're flying from Lima, Peru, up to La Paz, Bolivia, which is 14,000 feet up in the air. So we're sitting there. They're loading stuff onto the plane. You can see it coming up the conveyor belt. We see our cases. We see the Vic Rattlehead box sitting there. So we're feeling okay, good. They're loading everything on. Well, suddenly, the box is still on the tarmac. They take the escalator away. They close up the plane, and we take off. And we're like, "But you left Vic Rattlehead on the tarmac." Right? They're sitting on the tarmac. We never saw it again. We never got it back. So we had to have another one made. And a company came to us in Denver, Colorado, and did a interview with me and Dave about it, about how we had called them, and they very quickly got to work with their prosthetics and all their stuff that they do. It must have been like a Hollywood company. And they made us a new Vic Rattlehead suit like within a couple of days and shipped it out to us. So within, a week or two, we had Vic Rattlehead back on stage. And I guess that's probably the mask that you just showed in that picture, that probably Raphael or something was one of Kiko's friends that started working for us. That's probably him right there. And that's probably the outfit right there with the mask and everything.
I love that somewhere, there's a Vic Rattlehead that that stayed at the airport. It's like in the break room, it's they
put it on. Yeah, exactly. There's a guy at security, running the TSA. And he's in
right.
That suit.
Too awesome. Yeah, I mean, every band needs a good mascot.
They do. And it's hard to get one that actually sort of translates. Look, across all of the albums becomes a figurehead. In fact, look, what was the first record that we didn't use it on? It was really Countdown to Extinction. We had sort of alluded to it a little bit. That's when we brought in Hugh Syme to do. He did Countdown and Euthanasia, and his work, he's done a ton of Dream Theater stuff, but his before that, it was doing Rush. In fact, as I'm reading the Geddy Lee book, he's talking a lot about Hugh Syme and the ideas that he brought in for artwork. And I love those two records. I mean, those were incredible imageries. And, look, we're heading into the 90s. Now it's Pearl Jam, it's grunge, heavy metal and skulls and pointy guitars, and all this is really not so in favor. So I guess it provided an opportunity to maybe evolve the concept a little bit. And Hugh's fantastic. So, but, that was probably our first deviation. And then Cryptic Writings, and Risk, we didn't have him on there. So really, except for Rest in Peace, we didn't really use Vic on covers.
Yeah, Vic's on the back of Countdown. But...
On the back of Countdown. Yeah, we put him on the back. So he's still there, with the abacus, counting that over. And he's in the packaging for Euthanasia as well. So he's there. He's just not on the cover. Which, may be allowed to advance kind of the concept of the band a little broader. So I don't think it was such a bad thing. But yeah, it wouldn't be until The World Needs a Hero, when he's crawling onto Dave's chest, that we finally brought him back. And then he came back after that.
I think it's one of those things too. It's kind of fun. It's fun when a band, retires something like that for a while, and then all of a sudden it kind of comes back and it hits all those nostalgia points with you, and you're like, like that. That's what I need right now. I need some Vic Rattlehead in my life. It's funny too, is how long I was a Megadeth fan before I realized, it's the Speak No Evil, Hear No Evil, See No Evil. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like I was like, as the 13-year-old kid, you're like, that just looks cool. You don't really care the meaning behind it. You're like, that's just cool.
Well, look, as an Iron Maiden fan, which I think everybody is.
Yeah.
When I saw the first Maiden record and then Killers, it was like, whoa. And it's great because I think now on iTunes, they're sort of AI'd, so they move and they kind of pulse a little bit, right? Which they're super cool. But, that I think set the tone. Look, Motorhead had their mascot of sorts, right? So, in metal, we like mascots. It's what we do.
Oh yeah, every good metal band needs a mascot. Yeah. I guess that will do it for this episode of the David Ellefson Show.
There it is. Yeah. Our episode, recapping the caps of Speak No Evil, Hear No Evil, See No Evil. I'm David Ellefson.
I'm Joshua Toomey.
Yeah, we will be back soon. See ya.
The David Ellefson Show.